Good morning. I am on the Appalachian Trail out in Virginia near Shenandoah. And oh my God, it's beautiful. It's really just kind of taking my breath away, seeing just the sights and the quietness of the trail. I think I'm the only one out here so far, which makes it the perfect place to just kind of share my heart. I know I've already thrown a lot out there about Addie and my hike and all of the things that we have coming up that I'm sure a lot of people think we're absolutely crazy. But since Addie is not with me, I'm actually here on a little Chick-fil-A trip with my husband. He's actually back having meetings, and so I thought I'm heading out to Virginia, Shenandoah. But I thought I might give a little of our story. Since Addie's not here, sometimes it can be a little bit hard for Addie to hear. I think for her to like relive and remember all of the hard days can be overwhelming for her. It's overwhelming for me. I know sometimes it's reliving it. It just hurts. But it's also beautiful because it tells us how far we've come. But Addie is 16 and she is amazing. She's absolutely an inspiration to me and pretty much anybody that knows her, because you have to know where she's come from. She was diagnosed at 2 with what they would call profound regressive autism. She didn't have the pretty kind, and it was very hard because she is one that would do okay and then have these massive regressions. And when she would, it was almost like, let's just get in a storm shelter, because it felt like we were in a fight for her life, honestly. Addie was very self-injurious. She was diagnosed at 2, but at 3 was her first big regression after she had come out of a surgery, and she would hurt herself. She had bloody bite marks up and down her arms, bite marks, up and down. She had bald spots all in her hair, where she would pull her hair out when she would get frustrated. She was completely naked for a good many years. She wouldn't wear clothes, so I would have to hold her down just to get them on her because she couldn't come to school naked. But after so long of that, we decided, okay, let's wrap her in a blanket and take her to school naked. So we did that. At 3 years old, we threw her in the car, wrapped in a blanket. I would have he was either 4 or 5 at the time. He would sit in the back and hold her little hand so she couldn't hurt herself driving to school. And we would get to school, get her in the bathroom with some therapists, and we would hold her down. We would get her in the bathroom with a few therapists, and we would get the clothes on her. It took us a while, lots of sweat, lots of grit. And this was just every day. On top of that, she wouldn't sleep. She was up all night long. And that meant that I would be up all night long too. And I would sit up and I would hold her little hand so she couldn't hurt herself. And just pray. Pray for God to intervene. There were days that I prayed that God, just come back. Just come on back and take us home, because it was hard. It really, really, really was hard. And she was in a constant state of trying to escape our home, and she would. She was very crafty, very, very talented. It was hard for us to know how much she understood because of her lack of eye contact and her lack of speech and the constant self-injury. But when I would watch her go to the great lengths that she could to pile pillows up in front of our front door and try to get to the top latch that we added to keep her safe, when I would see the strategy that she would use, I was like, I think she's a little smarter than she's letting on here. But that was kind of our our journey, and that was not a few months, that was years. Addie would often try to run out in front of a moving car or jump in a body of water knowing that she couldn't swim, and when she would go under the water she would laugh, and it kept us in this extreme place of hypervigilance for a long time. And so honestly, there were a lot of times that I knew there was a part of me deep down that had hope. There was something in me that knew that there was more, that there was just something that was like giving me hope inside of me, and I couldn't put my finger on it because everything that I saw with my eyes told me a different story. I remember watching her at school through a one-way window with other parents at the same school, and I literally watched while their children progressed, and Addie would go backward, and I would just say, why God? And it was, it was quite the faith journey. It really was. I had faith, but it wasn't until this hardship with Addie that I really, really, really began to grasp a hold of that faith, because at some point you just realized, like, God is my only source. He is my only help, and He was. We weren't finding it in any therapy or any treatment or any medicine. And we tried. We did all of those things. I would have cut my right arm off to help her. Being a mom or a dad with a child with profound autism, you would do anything to help them. You would do anything to see peace, anything. And I just remember feeling so crushed, praying so hard, and I just remember grieving a lot. There's a lot of grieving that goes on, whether you want to admit it or not. Some parents may not want, and maybe they don't, but I grieved, and I grieved really heavy. All of those things that you would imagine with your only girl, like going with her to pick out a wedding dress, and going through that process of a wedding with her, and maybe getting her nails done together, or sitting at the end of her bed and having conversations like mothers and daughters do, walking her through boyfriend troubles, like all of those things, cheerleading. I grieved them, and I remember a specific day that I gave those up, and how hard I cried. And it was just an emotional season. It was emotional few years. And I have a lot of empathy and compassion when I meet a new person who has a child similar to Addie, just because I know something that they don't, which is that there's hope. And so I want to share a little bit about that today, where our hope came from. And how did I end up here on this crazy hike? So Addie, at the age of 9, actually it was the day before her 9th birthday, we had a little miracle. And it's really easy to think that maybe she didn't understand. With everything that I've explained with Addie, it's kind of hard to know how much she understood. If I call her name and she continues to run out in front of a moving car, that part was really hard for me. And so in 2017, I had this, I don't know, I would call it a year of preparation, but I started getting this weird hope. I began to hear, and my prayer life changed. And when I would pray for Addie, I was feeling a shift, and something was happening that hadn't happened before, but there was a hope or a certainty. It was that substance that we talk about with faith as a substance of things unseen. Started to get that substance. It was like I believed that God was about to give me a gift. And I announced it. I was leading a small group at the time, and I said, God's going to give me a gift. I don't know what it's going to be yet. And it was like all of 2017, I was just waiting. And I heard in my, I don't know if it was in my mind or my heart, but I heard, not audibly, but it was like an impression of God saying, I want you to take her to every worshipful environment that you can. And so I would find this little tent revival, and I would go and I would sit on the curb, and I would park my car close by, so if she did have a moment, we could run. And we did. There were a couple of times we ran. But one in particular, I know that she stayed, and she would look up at the sky, and she would look all around just so in awe, and I could see that she was soaking it in. And it was not too long after that I started having these dreams, and in these dreams, Addie would be standing beside my bed, and I heard her say, "Mommy." And when I had the dream, I woke up startled, because I've never heard her say my name, and it was so real. It was the most real thing I've ever heard, and it woke me up. And when I woke up, I just burst into tears, because it was a dream. But looking back, I think it was God showing me that she was in there, and not to give up and to keep praying. So I did. And so I actually took her off all of her medicines, except for her sleep medicine, all of her supplements. I took her off all of her therapies. And I just closed my eyes, and I said, "She's yours, God." And we had started a program that took a total leap of faith, that every one of the people that are in the therapy world told us, "Oh, this isn't proven, it's not research based, it's probably not going to get you anywhere." But something in us said, we need to try this. And so we did. And her tutor would come in every day, and she would sit next to her, and she would teach her age level academics. And I sat across the table, and I would just watch in awe while she would speak to her in these long, eloquent sentences. It was so honoring and so different from how I'd been speaking to her in my 1 or 2, 3-word sentences and requests. And she would teach her science and the arts and poetry and history. And it was one day, the day before her 9th birthday, that Addie was sitting across the table from me, and she got inspired, and she looked at me, and she made piercing eye contact, and she smiled, almost as a way to say, "Get ready, Mom." And she took her little finger, and letter by letter, she spelled her first poem. And the poem said, "So music really plays as the American eagle soars. I can send new airs to air, never to have my soul care. Me, God, open my mind, steady my heart. His need will call. Are some still lost? I'm autistic and free." I don't even know how to express what my reaction was like, but let's just say that it was not typical for me. I was violently shaking. I was weeping, wailing. I couldn't walk for a few hours. I remember we had a ship shopper downstairs, and I came down and my legs were heavy. You would think I was drunk, and I could hardly get my words out. And I just kept saying, "It's a miracle." But after she spelled this and she saw my reaction, and she's very troubled by my reaction because I'm a pretty stoic person, And she spelled, "It's okay, Mom. I'm in here." And I remember not even knowing how to process what I was feeling. I remember thinking, I am so thankful that she's in there, but oh my God, have I gotten it wrong? Like, I have totally gotten it wrong. And so I was feeling all these feelings at once. But it was the beginning of a new paradigm shift that we had in our home. We had begun to see everything differently. And for us, it changed our entire lives. And I began to work with Addie, and she began to spell for me. And it was like playing catch up. You know, if you think about, if you have this child and they were abducted for 9 years and then they come home, like, what would you ask them? And you're almost nervous to ask them questions because it's like you knew that you had somehow contributed to their pain. You had made mistakes, but let me tell you, she was the most gracious, kind, understanding, unlike I feel like I would be. As she shared how painful it was for her to walk in a room full of people, and those people would say hello to everybody except for her, and how she felt invisible, underestimated, and she just started walking through life just feeling like she didn't exist, even though she's like, I'm right here. And she started sharing about all of the things that we would want to know. Like, you know, one of the first questions I ask is, what's your favorite color? Only to find out that Addie sees the entire world in color. She has what you call synesthesia. And Addie sees colors around people. She sees colors in nature. Like, just seeing this, it's all lit up with color because she sees on a quantum level. Anything that has energy, Addie sees it in color. So the wildlife that we hear, the buzzing sounds, music has a color. Every note to every musical note has a color, a different color. And it explained why she was always covering her eyes when she would hear a loud noise. And it explains why her world is quite overstimulated with sounds and experiencing life with such vibrancy. I could only imagine that for her, but it was just fascinating hearing for the first time. And she was so eager to share. And I remember she said, I said, do you see colors on people? And she said, yes, don't you? And I said, no, I do not. And I found out that I'm green, which is funny because I am a peacemaker, and green is at the very center of the rainbow. And she talks about how the further you go up to the rainbow at the end, those colors are more loving and accepting. And then at the other end of the rainbow, for Addie anyway, that's the further you get to, like, she would call it anger. Like, my poor husband is red. He's a businessman, and he is very reactive. That's the word. He is very reactive. And so the more reactive you are, the redder you are. And so he would say to Addie, how do I not be red anymore? And she would spell, Dad, just love people more. That's it. Just love people more. And she made it so simple. This is lengthy, I know, but our story, I'm just barely getting into it, and I just need to share this. Addie started talking about how badly she longed for friends, how much she wanted just one friend. And she didn't have friends. Even our sweet kids in the special needs community, they are all about friendships and they make friends. But when you are not able to speak and you aren't able to control your motor functions, like your smile. Addie often says, my face lies. My face doesn't tell the truth. And so sometimes Addie will be giggling hysterically, and people are like, oh, she's so happy. And it's not. She's anxious. That's how she manifests anxiety. But sometimes she's really happy and she's got a scowl on her face. And just like she can't control the motor input from her brain to her mouth, she can't get her speech out because of that motor. It's the same with her facial expressions and her body. All of those things are affected with this level of profound autism that Addie has. And so it's really easy to make assumptions about our children when they're truly gifted and amazing and beautiful. They just need some help. But she talked about her desire for friends. And when she would make her Christmas wish list, she would always put 3 or 4 things on there. And at the top of every list, the first thing she would ask for is friends. And that would literally make Brian and I cry ourselves to sleep every time, because she would ask for the one thing we couldn't give her. But then she began to spell about her desire for purpose and how she wanted to leave her mark on the world. She wanted to be a ministry. She wanted to share the love of God with people, which really threw me off, because, not only had I underestimated her, to think that she has that same desire in her, just like we do, to make a difference in people's lives, like, it just shook me to my core. And so when Brian and I were having that conversation about who's going to take care of her when we're not here anymore, who's going to love her, and who's going to keep her safe, I can't even begin to explain that feeling, because it's this overwhelming feeling of, like, I need her to go the same time as me. Like, I can't leave her behind. I have to protect her. And, as a mom or a dad, like, you just can't shake that. And it's there for every single one of us, and when you have a child that doesn't speak, and they can't defend themselves, it's there even more. You've got to be the one that's advocating and defending and doing all of the things that we do for our children naturally. But this is just a whole new level. Okay, I just got stung by something. You never know what you're gonna get on these trails. I don't know what that was, but it got me. Maybe it was a sweat bee, I don't know. I want to share probably one of the most significant parts of Addie. And this is one that probably has me out here today. But Addie, when she would spell in her thousands of letters, every single one of those letters would say, love me more, please love me more. And it was very frustrating. Being her mom, obviously, I couldn't possibly love her more. I mean, I felt like I had shown that in everything that I had done, fighting for her and traveling across the U.S., putting her in every research study and protecting her and loving her. I didn't understand it. And she just kept spelling it over and over and over. And one day, it's like, okay, she perceives the world so different. We know that. And sometimes I just had to kind of climb in and try to understand her perceptions. I'm going through another very muddy mess. Trying to understand her perception. And so I pulled out a piece of paper and I wrote it down. The things, and I labeled them. It was like 1 through 3, 1 through 4, something like that. The things that Addie needs to experience and feel love are. And the things that she wrote down really shook me. And the first thing she wrote down was, believe in me and teach me. The second thing she wrote down was, read to me. And the third thing she wrote down was push me. I sat in it for a little bit, probably even days, because I was trying to process that. You know, I knew what I needed to see and feel to experience love, which were very different than that. But that was because I had the opportunity to be spoken to be taught, to be believed in, to be read to. With Addie, when I would read to her growing up, she would take the pages and start rapidly flipping through them. And to me, it was, you know, and then shut the book. To me, that said, this is making me anxious. I don't want to be read to. But really what was going on is she was so excited on the inside, and then she couldn't control her body. And that's what it would look like. She would flip through. But I had no idea to know that. And so with that, you know, we had to shift a lot of things around to make this child feel loved. And so we did, you know, once we made those tweaks and we started talking to her, I started reading her all these classic books, and, you know, I would read to her anything that I could get. I would read it to her, and I would teach her, and I began to push her. We started to take risk. That is a very significant word for us right now. You know, when people ask, why are you hiking? Why are you hiking with your child that gets very dysregulated and gets very overwhelmed? And while she is amazing, when we started speaking to her differently and giving her those things, like, she is so regulated and full of self-control 90% of the time. Now, when she's not. Like, just brace yourself. But most of the time she is so easy. We began to take risk with her. Even though we'd had an experience where we put her on a plane, and I can't believe they didn't kick us off the plane. It was that intense. I mean, she was fighting, she was screaming, she was biting, she was doing all of the things, and I just remember thinking, I will never do this again. This is the worst experience I've ever had in my life. This is the last time this would ever happen. And then I remember just a few months after that, I was driving in my car, and I heard that small, subtle voice again. That same thing that said, God is about to give you a gift. It said, I want you to plan an overseas flight and take her on a vacation. And it sounded crazy, and everyone that I told absolutely thought that I lost my mind, but I did it. And let me tell you that child thrived. She was on the plane and she loved it. She was so happy, and the look on her face just said, yes, you pushed me, you believed in me, you took a risk. And it, after that, like, there was a shift in my family, there was a shift in my marriage. And so just taking those risks that we do often with her, constantly, and sometimes they backfire on us. We've taken a risk, and it's been very stressful, to say the least. But we have nonetheless taken them. I don't think you personally can have faith without risk. I think that risk is something that you have to do to show that substance, faith. And a lot of times God will ask us to do things that fear will jump in and say, no, you're either going to fail, or this is going to turn out bad, or it's going to backfire, and this might not be good. But in our world, I've always been a risk taker. Now, before my relationship with God, risk looked like recklessness. I did a lot of things I'm not proud of. I was constantly putting myself in situations that just weren't always the best. But, risk after my faith has been more beautiful and adventurous and meaningful, and I don't know, beautiful is the word. But with our risk, it requires that I'm constantly listening when I hear that prompting from God. And, every time I've heard it, I listen. I'm like, if this is you, God, I will not say no. I can't say no. But I had gone out to the woods by myself a couple of months ago, 6 weeks ago. And it was after a season at work. Doing what I do is amazing. I love it. It's absolutely the honor and the joy of my life. But for an introvert who does not have qualifications for what I'm doing, it's heavy. It's hard. There's a lot of fundraising involved. And, fundraising for an introvert is just not fun. I'm sorry. I'm totally about to cross over. So let's hope that I do not bust my butt here. But with all of that, it's just been very heavy for me. And I feel exhausted every day. And on top of that, I have just felt like, okay, God, where have you been? I have not felt you. Like, I need to feel God's presence a lot, especially when he's called me to do something I'm not qualified for. Like, I need you close. And I've been too busy to feel that closeness. And so I got off on a little sabbatical, and I felt like I was being called to the woods, similar to this. And I went out to North Georgia and for a few days by myself, and I just remember taking my shoes off and going on these little trails barefoot and just lifting my face, and I could feel the sun like breach through the trees, and I would just literally put my face in the sun, and I would just pray like, God, I need you so much. And at some point, I was being drawn to the Appalachian Trail. Never hiked, never been a hiker. It's just not me. But it was kind of that same nudging, go for a hike. And so I went for a hike, and I brought my dog, and I loved it. I just felt so connected to nature, so connected to God. All of that heaviness I'd been feeling was gone, and I felt this, what I would call like, if you've ever studied those near-death encounters where people have this perfect peace, perfect joy. There's like no offense. You feel so good. It's not earthly. And I just felt amazing. And it was like that for a few days. And then finally my family came and joined me, and we were hiking. And I came to this like cross where it was like, okay, go to the left to this waterfall. And then the word Appalachian Trail was on the other one. And it's like my heart lit up. And I got so excited. And I don't know why. And I told Brian, I'm like, okay, when we go see this waterfall, I want to go on the trail, the Appalachian Trail. We've got to. And so we did that. And we're walking on the trail. And as we were there, that voice again, that impression said to me, you and Addie are going to hike this trail. And I was like, that's crazy. And I said it out loud, and my husband's like, oh, here we go again. And he was like, are we really going to go down this path? Are you really going to start, coming up with your next crazy idea? And I was like, it's not my idea. It's not my idea. I was like, I love my bed. I have to take medicine to get to sleep. Addie has to take medicine to get to sleep. I'm probably not going to sleep out there. I run an organization. It's not my idea. And as I talked it out with him, I saw all of it. It was, God showing me that Addie and I are going to walk the trail. We're going to hike, and we're going to rekindle our relationship, because running Addie's big army has been hard and it takes a lot of time. And so I haven't been working with Addie. I haven't been doing our spelling. Like, her voice has almost been a little shut down because I'm too busy to work with her, which is embarrassing for me to say right now, but look at this. Oh, that makes me happy. It does make me sad when I think about it, but he was showing me how we were going to rekindle our relationship, and we were going to think about it this way. Our entire life has been nothing but hard. It just has been. But one thing that Addie and I are really good at is pushing through hard and not giving up. And there's something so profound in this hike on the Appalachian Trail that is hard, and it's going to rain, and we're not going to sleep. But it's beautiful in the pain, and we're not going to give up. And we're going to push Addie, and we're going to push me. And in that process, I believe that God is going to give me and Addie our next gift. What is that? I don't know. But it has that same feeling that I had before her first miracle of communication. So I think along this journey, hiking and just being in nature and pushing through really hard things and giving Addie her request to be pushed and believed in, and having our community and the hiking community cheer us on, and just having a support, I think is going to be the most beautiful thing. And so, risk. I mean, this is a huge risk, but I fully believe that it is a risk that God's called us to do. And Addie's desire in this is to spread love on the trail. And so she's so good at that. She loves to write love letters, words of encouragement, very profound, deep things that she will spell that you know. It may or may not be coming from her sometimes. Sometimes you know that, like, she has a sweet connection with God. And so I love to see the things that she shares. And we're super excited. Our goal is to do 250 miles on the trail starting in May at the end. And we're going to be prepping and training and getting ourselves ready. And we hope that we have a whole community of people that are cheering us on and supporting us as we go, and we share stories and we share difficulty and challenges along the way, but also the victories. We're gonna bring you guys along the ride, and we're excited to share our journey with you.